Welcome to Dark Loops Productions. Why is this so good? A podcast for discussing something that we all find in pop culture that makes us drop to our knees and say, why is this so good? Tonight, we've come together to discuss Netflix and DC Comics' The Sandman. Joining me in the podcast tonight is an amazing group of Sandman fans. Sandman fans, please introduce yourselves to the audience. Tell them a little something about who you are. And then please tell us about how you found the Sandman. And we will start with Isaac.
Hello, everybody. My name's Dr. Isaac Taitz. I am a clinical psychologist specializing in geek therapy as well as sleep and dreaming therapy for kids, teens, basically kids of all ages. And I got into the Sandman actually from my cousin, who is an art director, and he gave me this comic and he said, check this out, I think you'll like it. And he was right. It's fascinating. It was engrossing. It was art in its many forms. And I was hooked. And I'm very excited to see how this series, and especially on Netflix, progresses.
Fantastic. How about you, Maisha?
Hi, everyone. I'm Maisha, and I am a first-year master's student at Illinois State University, and I'm currently studying cognitive and experimental psychology. So my main, academically, I'm highly interested in virtual reality, perception, and human factors and tool use and everything related to that. But apart from that, I'm a huge pop culture nerd. I devour everything. So I came across Sandman through actually Neil Gaiman, because I love Neil Gaiman. I think I've read all of his books and I can talk about him all the time. So when I was looking other works of him, so I came across Sandman, although I just read 2 volumes of the comic. So because I came from a different country and it was not that available to have the comics there. So but when Netflix decided to do a show and I heard that Neil Gaiman is related to that, he's working with the show, I got very excited. And I didn't really wait that much long. I just watched the show at in 2 settings, I think. So and I was highly impressed. And I'm really hoping that they will renew the show and we'll get a season 2. So I'm just hoping for the best to get that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Fantastic. So glad you're here. How about you, Ian?
Hey everyone, my name is Ian. I am a second-year grad student at Illinois State University in the Wonsa Kim School of Fine Art graduate program. And I came across Sandman actually way earlier. I didn't touch on the comics until just recently, but it was through Yoshitaka Amano's artwork for it. And it was when I was also deep diving into their work when I was younger. And then I found out that Netflix had greenlit production and they were coming out with it. And I was fascinated. It was that extra kick of merging both the whimsical, the fantastical, and the unknown into the horror, and it just played out so beautifully. And I am excited for if there's to be a season 2, it's set up beautifully for it. So I'm very excited to see what all is to be entailed with the Sandman.
Fantastic. And how about you, Burak?
Hello, everyone. My name is Burak. I am an industrial and organizational psychologist by training, and I'm a new faculty in the psychology department at ISU. So academically, I am interested in personality with an emphasis on the dark personality. So I'm trying to understand what type of different dark personality traits contribute to success, different work-related behaviors. And also I was a gamer, hardcore gamer, I would say, when I was an undergraduate. As I get into the adulthood, it became more like a hobby, but it is still something I am passionate. So I am directing my research around that. I'm trying to understand how different personality compositions in video game teams relate to various behaviors and outcomes. So my first encounter with Sandman was by coincidence. There was a bookstore that I frequently visited when I was in Turkey. So I went there and checked random stuff all the time. And I have seen the cover of one of the comics.
Mhm.
I'm talking about like maybe 20 years ago. And we didn't have all the series available. So we just had random 1 or 2 copies of the first episode. I was like shocked. I was impressed by the art. I was impressed by the story, how the characters were developed. I was like, okay, I'm gonna buy this, but you need to tell me when you will have the other episodes because I can't wait. I can't wait to read them.
Mhm.
That happened in a very long time, but this is how I start my journey with Sandman. And I was both excited and worried when I first heard that it is coming alive as a TV series because, you know, it is always hit or miss when it comes to translating some kind of novel or a comic as a TV show or as a movie. But I will give them that. That was a very good production. I really enjoyed watching every second, and I can't wait for the second season.
Yeah, I like your comment about being excited and being scared. I mean, American Gods is probably my favorite novel, one of my favorite novels. And I absolutely love the first season of what they did with that. And from there, it just, for me, fell apart. And then it was canceled. And that hurt. And I imagine it hurt Neil Gaiman too. And I suspect when it came around to this one, he said, I'm in the writing room. That's all there is to it. And he's the lead writer on the series. So very, very much to the show's benefit. So I'm a cognitive psychologist, philosopher. I study perception. I do philosophy on ontology and what we might want to call reality, which makes it clear why I would love a story like The Sandman. And I came across Sandman at the public library probably about 10 years ago when I was getting back into comics. So my road back into comics was Hayao Miyazaki's Princess Mononoke, which I watched in 1998 3 times in 2 days. It just blew me away. It was the best story I've ever seen, I'll be honest about it. And I read everything I could about Miyazaki, and then I bought the manga version of Nausicaa Valley of the Wind, and that ended taking me to the library to try to find more graphic novels, and I found Sandman. Didn't finish reading the entire series. I probably read the equivalent of the series that we just saw in the television show. But for me, the fact that Gaiman stayed in the writing room and was unbelievably important, because for me, this show was more poetry than plot. This is poetry, visual poetry about the human condition that doesn't confine itself to traditional analytic detective kind of world building. And I just love Gaiman's ability to do whatever the hell he wants in the narrative world. And we're just asked to keep up. All right. So what I asked each of you to do is to come up with a favorite scene, favorite episode, favorite character from the series, whatever. I'd ask you to talk about it for a little bit. Tell us why it's your favorite. And then we'll all talk about that for a while, and then we'll go on to another one of us. So first thing I'll do is ask if there's anyone who would like to go first. All right, then. Hearing no volunteers, I'm going to call on Isaac.
So when I got this question of who is my favorite character or favorite scene in particular, I know everybody loves Dream, and I'll let everybody else kind of sing Dream's praises. But as far as one amazing aspect about the Netflix series, that whether it was Neil or whether it was the actors or whether it was the animation team, but they did a fantastic job when illustrating lucid dreaming, when illustrating Rose Walker's abilities as the dream vortex. So spoiler for anyone who's just getting into it, but near the middle of this first season, we follow this character, Rose Walker, who apparently has this ability to bring everyone's dreams together. And she has the ability to control and manipulate the boundaries between dreams. Now, being able to pull dreams together, we haven't scientifically shown this no matter how many times the International Association for the Study of Dreams hosts this parapsychology panel on precognitive
Right.
dreaming or visitation dreams. But that just means we haven't proven it exists.
Exactly.
But that's how science works. So in the Sandman Netflix series, not only do they illustrate that, you know, people's dreams are starting to blend in with each other, that she is opening doorways from one dream to go into another, which in and of itself is a lucid ability that when you have a boundary, a barrier, that you're covering something up and you're thinking of something else behind it, once you uncover that area, your dreaming mind has basically filled in the gaps. You've allowed it to kind of do something behind the curtain and then you reveal it. Very magical. In addition, when Rose discovers that she is lucid, you'll notice that the animation around her begins to fuzz, gets to buzz. And this very much mirrors the kind of energy, the kind of excitement that lucid dreamers experience, that I've experienced when I did lucid dreaming, and hopefully got people to experience in my honors thesis and undergrad, of this ability that you can do anything, that you have the power, that you can engage in the world and manipulate it. So they illustrate this, they discuss this as being the dream vortex. And in the dream vortex, you can create and destroy universes. Essentially, the same thing can happen for lucid dreamers. If you have recorded your sleep enough times that you're remembering enough dreams, and you practice noticing your dream signs with these state of consciousness checks, eventually you can manipulate your dream world around you. And a lot of therapeutic interventions are, being studied, and I utilize some in my practice of practicing whether some of your waking activities, some behaviors like speaking in front of an audience or confronting a figure that you don't want to confront in waking life, you can do that in a lucid dream. Or even so, once you learn that you do have some sense of control over your dreaming world, maybe the waking world isn't that out of your control either. So they did a fantastic job illustrating this. And I really liked how everybody was kind of portraying just the shock and the surprise from dreams, seeing this lucid dreamer, wandering around, and all the dream signs kind of about him of mixed up text behind him in that one scene by the park, or seeing Rose herself essentially will the dream that she wants to see. So if you will it, it is not a dream, it is a lucid dream.
Very well said. Last I heard on the research on lucid dreaming, they were working with devices that would give you a slight shock when you hit a certain REM state or something that would not wake you up according, per se, but would put you in a different state of consciousness. So is it, in your experience, is it something that it's that easy to do, or is it actually more training yourself?
There's different induction methods that have been studied. What you're describing is, I believe that was the REM-E dreamer, or perhaps another approach. That one obviously can be tricky, especially because a shock here and there can completely wake you up, or it might not be too pleasant. But the lucid dreaming has been, the brainwave that lucid dreaming kind of persists at is about halfway between waking and dreaming. This was validated by Alan Hobson at Harvard University, with a few other researchers, of course. And so if we're able to kind of bring about the sense of awareness through a variety of these induction methods, then it is doable. It is a learnable trait, as kind of clarified by Paul Tholley in the 1960s, where this was kind of first introduced. So it is learnable in terms of waking yourself up and in the middle of the night and bringing some waking consciousness to your mind, and then recounting the dream and setting an intention to come back to bed. So that's the wake back to bed technique. Stephen LeBerge, originally from Stanford and now with his own institute in Hawaii, has developed this and a few other techniques, particularly mnemonic induction of lucid dreaming, where you have gone over your dreams every morning when you wake up, you're noticing particular dream signs unique to you. So if you happen to see Dream, Morpheus, or Ravens during your dreams, well, ravens a little bit easier, you may see them in waking life. And so every time you see a raven in waking life, you might conduct what used to be called a reality check, but now we're moving towards calling it a state or a state of consciousness check.
Yeah.
And this can either be checking, small text and time, like they showed in the Sandman series, that if you notice when Rose first meets Dream, the signs on the roads are, jumbled and garbled. The brain cannot reconstruct that too much. Time itself, you don't have a literal clock in your dream, and the brain can't quite predict it too well. But also your hands are very malleable. So your fingers can stretch like rubber, or they'll have extra digits and things like that. So you can test what state of consciousness you're in. And once you realize you're dreaming and you calm down so you don't get too excited and wake yourself up out of the dream, now you get to be lucid, which doesn't always mean that you're in control. They're not mutually inclusive, control dreams and lucid dreams, but you can set your intention before the bed. I'll become lucid and I will, request an audience with Dream. I've done that once, but it's been a little bit tricky, and then I got kicked right out. So maybe I need a more formal approach.
How dare you to my role? Exactly. And I'm actually fascinated by the way you redescribed it in terms of a reality check as opposed to a state check.
Other way around. State check instead of reality check. Both are occurring in reality. You are dreaming in reality.
Yes.
But what state of consciousness are you? That's the reframe that the field has been moving towards.
Well, I think that's healthy, right? And I think it's increasingly coherent about how we talk about the relationship between what we call experience and what we call reality. A dichotomy is not the most coherent way to move forward. So fantastic. All right. How about you, Maisha?
Okay, I was actually kind of conflict between two episodes, like episode 5 and episode 6. Both were really my favorite. So then I thought about going with episode 6, The Sound of Her Wings. That is actually my most favorite episode from Sandman. And also, Death is my favorite character. So that kind of related to both of it. I can't really explain things in an academic way that like Dr. Isaac explained things. I just like it because I felt like entire episode felt like a poem to me, because it's like death is supposed to be a morbid character. Death is supposed to be sad. It's supposed to be gloomy, that when you die, you're terrified of death. But how Neil Gaiman portrays death in Sandman is that when you die, you will see a face that will give you hope. That will make you feel better about yourself, make you feel not afraid of about the unknown that you're. So that kind of made me feel really good about it. At the same time, the episode also showed hope, and that's also another part of another favorite thing of me. That's also one of my another part of that I really liked about the episode, because like Hob is also kind of a bearer of hope here. Like he kind of single-handedly destroyed Dream's opinion about human being. It's like he kind of thought that human beings are like if they're given immortality, they will not want to leave. They will feel like they will just want to, even if like they go through so many difficult situations, so many conflicts. At one point they will feel despair and they will just want to die. But Hob just destroyed everything, and he's like, no, I'm here to stay, and I'm just going to live forever, and that's just me. So he's such a mood. So I really liked it. I really liked the entire episode was like very beautiful to me. But I also liked episode 5 too. So
well, I'm gonna say episode 5, so that's okay if someone gets to it before me. But I gotta say, that episode was such a wonderful adaptation of the comic, and it's so difficult to bring narrative text to life and do it well, and it did it, and it brought it to life in all the right ways, the other ways that it felt like a poem, right? And it's what Gaiman's a master at is playing games with words. Wouldn't be surprised if Gaiman is some kind of not his actual born name. He's playing with words, right?
Yep.
And to take word, I think he has an implicit understanding that all words get their meaning in relation to all other words. So words don't have meanings all their own, which means they always have a sort of dialectic relationship with the rest of the words. So once you think a word's supposed to mean sad, it entails all the other things that give sadness its meaning. And Gaiman just loves to play in that space and go back and forth and not spend a lot of time trying to give analytic definitions, but just putting the words into life, into action. And then, if you don't like what he's saying, you can turn the channel or, not watch. But people that are looking for words as deictic pointers, things that point to reality as it is, and that's what it means, they're just not going to find themselves at home in Gaiman. Because that's not what he's doing with the words. So that episode was just fantastic.
Yeah. Also, I just want to add something though, because you were explaining about adaptation of the episode. So I was watching a lot of I just do this because I just do this. I watch interviews about the actors, about the writers, that what they thought about the show and everything. So I was watching the interviews, how they came to do this series at all. So the actress, I forgot her name, the actress who played the character Death. So she was just, so they're auditioning a lot of character for the Death, but Death is a very difficult character to portray. And because she's supposed to give people hope. So when she came, so there is one scene where she kind of scolds Morpheus when he was brooding and he was being sad. Yeah, don't come near to me and everything. So during her audition, she just nailed it. Nobody else did it. She just nailed it. And Neil Gaiman was like, yeah, this is the one. She's going to be our Death. So it is just a little bit of trivia for you guys.
It doesn't surprise me that Gaiman was the one who had that reaction, because Dream is Gaiman. I mean, he looks like him. He's got that 80s goth punk rock thing nailed down. And she's the one he would want to talk him out of a brooding mood, right? And very, 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 very clever. Anybody else want to comment on that?
No, that was outside of the character that I loved, which I don't know if I can reveal that soon or whatever. But Death was one of those characters where, especially someone who came like me, who came up from such a emotionally and mentally traumatizing idea of death through different facets of Christianity, different denominations. It was something that I still work through this idea of just death. And so when watching it, death had this aura, this sense that it could, which in this, death is personified through the lens and care and actions of a woman. But I say that it's just more expansive. It's just how we know how to take in this knowledge of caring. We wouldn't associate a man and a dominating masculine to have this hand reach out to you. It's I compare it to the idea of, when we're scared to death or something, we think about either the love we've experienced from another person or the sense of comfort from our mothers, or some type of the fear comes in this very infantile sense, where that's what we dwindle it down to. It's this idea that it's still so unknown. When we grow up, it's this idea that we can put an answer to something, or we can reassure ourselves with an answer. And death is just one of those things that we cling to so adamantly, that there is an answer, or that we rely on faith. And instead, when the bricks are knocked down and our walls are pushed down to its very limits and we're left with nothing, it still is this both mature and infantile fear of something we cannot comprehend. So in the portrayal of death being a woman, but also I think it was just beautifully done to be so unapologetic of death being a woman of color, that there is so much in this idea that it's asking for people without screaming it at them to be willing to see, where they're saying, if this is touching your heart, if this is opening a part of you that maybe you're other people don't get to see, something that is touching on the more vulnerable and emotional side of you. Lean into that also, not just in the sense of the afterlife, but with other people, because I think it was just a very, very honest and human personification of fear, and then stacked onto that the idea of fear to death.
Mm-hmm.
So you're actually touching on an element that the episode itself also was illustrating, that every character that Death, as played by Kirby Howell-Baptiste, I just looked it up, so amazingly interacted with, they're all different walks of life, and they're all different ethnicities and religions, and everybody, the one true constant in life is death. And some people say taxes too, but everybody has to experience this unless you're Hob and you decide not to, and the endless are on your side.
Right.
But this is a constant that we're all going to experience. And each of us has our different ways of dealing with it, of accepting it, of rejecting it, of fighting against it. And as Maisha points out, even in the relationship with those who do not die, there is this concept of what in psychology we call the continuing bond. So here it's shown really literally that you literally have this immortal being getting to kind of, meet up for coffee and drinks and check in and chat. But this is something that we can do on our own while we're still living and with those that are deceased. So one of the elements that I also work with in my practice is grief and bereavement.
Yes.
And bereavement dreams, which was my honors thesis in grad school, not honors thesis, dissertation in grad school. So everybody will experience grief in different ways, but you can maintain your connection with the deceased through either connection, which is the more the research is showing is the more feminine approach of connecting with those that are close to you, at least for most women. And then the more masculine approach is considered the mundane dream, just kind of doing the same old thing you're always doing. So you can think like Hob and Dream, they're always kind of meeting up and they're having coffee or tea, more British, and at least for most men. But the research shows that there's some, female presenting folks that do not, get through their grief just by maintaining their connections or having the happy, healthy dream or seeing their deceased separate from them in the separation dream category. And there are some masculine presenting folks that do not quite continue on with their bonds just by, keeping busy. And rather it's how the other half does it. When they process grief from the other side of the gender spectrum, they actually can progress. So the same thing can happen in dreams as well.
What I really like about what you're saying is, Gaiman is from England, fairly individualistic country like the United States, where we don't have ritualized grief. In other words, we have funerals, right? But we don't teach as our cultural training how to deal with loss. And so we leave it up to families, we leave it up to individuals to find how to deal with it. And there are cultures that, in fact, do teach grieving. There's many days of mourning that go on collectively following the death of a loved one. And what this does, my experience of what this does is it's not this you think about it cognitively and you're not alone. You actually experience not being alone in your grieving because you're not. You're with a group of people. You've been with a group of people every time someone passed your entire life. That's what your culture does. And so these spaces are created for you to have extended periods with others, to cry, to laugh, to do all the different things that you mentioned there. And I'd be interested in if those cultures might experience death somewhat differently. In other words, one of the dominant theories in social psychology is terror management, right? That somehow we're all terrified of our pending death. And I mean, it just sounds like a very individualistic way to talk about death and talk about the experience of it. So it doesn't surprise me that Gaiman, an Englishman, wrote a joyous death character, a frolicky death character who's trying to bring a little something into our understanding of death as Western analytic types that just doesn't seem to really be practiced in at least the culture that I grew up in.
Interesting.
It's also,
Yeah,
go ahead. Well, just as a quick aside, Gaiman, though he is from England, his ancestry also has some Jewish origin, and so is the first character that we see Death whisk away. He says the Shema, which is the Jewish kind of prayer to kind of hopefully kind of connect. And there are, you know, a lot of rites and rituals, and even in this culture, which I share, we have this a prolonged ritual where the whole routine is the bereaved stay at home, they cover up their mirrors, they don't worry about their aesthetics, and everyone else comes to visit them, brings them food. You just focus on getting through that process. So though it is not fully joyous, there is this aspect of celebrating life, of coming in and supporting each other. And many other cultures do something similar. Sorry for interrupting, Burak. What were you going to say?
Right, you're fine. I was going to say that, like, I agree that there is that cultural element, but if you think about other ways that is demonstrated on the TV, there are pretty stereotypical demonstrations of that. One of the most successful ones that I remember, like, we have the traditional Reaper type of that, and then we have humanized that. Like, if you guys watch Supernatural, that was portrayed as a very old man who is wearing a suit and driving a classic car with a big shiny ring and smoking in a cool way.
One of the best episodes of Supernatural.
Yeah, it was. And it was like, that was the traditional sad and gloomy way to portray that. Like, this is more stereotypical way. What I think Neil Gaiman does is that if that portrait of that is like taking an orange, drawing that and painting that to orange as a color, what Gaiman does is it just draws that with using pink, using black, unnatural colors. He just used his imagination to give life to something we already know that it existed. It was shown multiple times in similar media, but it is so different from the typical way that it was portrayed. I really appreciated that.
Yeah, so we've got, both of you are combining into very interesting points here. On the one hand, there's Neil Gaiman being dialectical, just taking something and trying to produce something that feels like a contradiction. At the same time, Isaac informs us that there is a Jewish background to Gaiman, that in fact has a culture he brings to a predominantly English culture. And I have no idea if Gaiman ever thought about, I'm bringing this ritualized view to death. All I know is, as a writer, I want to challenge, I want to contradict, and I'm going to make death joyous. And again, why in the end he did it, I don't know if a good writer can ever really answer that. They do it and it works. But yeah, I think you're both very, very on target there. So it's more than just happy death. It's a very rich thing that he's writing there.
I want to add a bit of it because I don't know if it's relevant or not. Like, I read a bit of Terry Pratchett also, and I also know that Neil Gaiman worked with Terry Pratchett. So in Discworld, we see another type of death. Like, I love death in Discworld too. And he's like, that death is like very human. So I don't know if that has like any influence on Neil Gaiman's portrayal of death or not. But yeah, that's also, I think, relevant.
Now that is a very British death, but also rather silly.
Very silly, and I loved him in the book, so yeah.
Yeah, the guy who played Death in Supernatural also had a very English goth kind of feel to him, but in the coolest possible goth way that wasn't punk rock, right? He was kind of an older guy. The soundtrack was totally amazing. And the guy played it amazingly well. Yeah. Anything else on that episode? Okay, let's move on to Ian.
So as most of everyone here has met me only like in this like setting outside of Maisha, and it's one of the characters that I relate with, and it's not surprising, is Desire, and it's the idea that there's it's the idea that they're minuscule in a sense that the screen time was low compared to really everyone else. It was like they were giving you a piece of like this like what like forbidden fruit where it's like, oh, you like it, okay, we're going to give you a little bit more here, feel it, we're going to feed into it.
Yeah.
But I think, or I know, like the reason why I loved seeing Desire so much was there was in the gender dysphoria that I experienced so much growing up, the inability to express femininity and strong femininity, as well as the inability to kind of like also like take that and name it for myself. Desire just at first glance just visually encapsulates all of that. And so, and it's also, it was growing up like I just got my brown hair back. I was completely like I had all bleached hair, and I would I have like a little bit of Italian in my blood, and it's just enough where it's like the eyebrows are there, and I was like, no, I want like the thick eyebrow, I want the 90s Versace, I'm gonna do it. So it was like everything that like I had worked and always like chiseling down and chiseling out and finding myself more. I was like, if I would have just saw that growing up, but instead I had him from Powerpuff Girls being somewhere I was like, oh yeah, like androgynous crab like creature. I was like, that's me. I mean, I was also I'm a Cancer, so I was like, that's me too.
No.
So but it was, and I think it was, I forgot, there was a line, I should have prepared it. It was
We're fine.
It was when they were talking with Despair, and it was this they correlated the idea of dreams or desire and despair, basically like they work off each other, like they're two of the sides of the same coin. And that was like it's a manipulative like it's a manipulative phrase, because that it does nothing but just have people feed into one side or the other. Like you can't, like there's this like lack of accountability also in the sense of dreaming, and then it's also how far you look into the dreams and human nature. So it was a whole like loaded idea, but the key there was manipulation. And I don't know, it's I think it is also, it's embedded, where I love so many other characters for these traits that they can show us, and that there wasn't one character I disliked in the show, because I could still, like, even if they were bad to the bone and they were causing all this chaos, I was like, oh no, like that's and like immaculate to see how this is being displayed.
Yes.
But and I think it's it's the elevation of seeing heightened, strong, and also sexual or lack thereof sexual energy portrayed, that's also in queerness, that Sandman touches on so well. And they first actually give you that with Oh Lucy, because it's this idea that there's that androgyny, there's that the drapery, the elegance, and it all touches on symbols of power that are also, weirdly enough, especially growing up and looking at it as a born at birth male, it's taught to you where it's like, oh, that's bad, or that's like this elegance, this femininity is still bad, but it's also so beautiful and it's so strong. And then that is just elevated, and then just it's elevated to the extent where desire is almost like it was just it, like it was the other side of the same coin. And it gave me the life that I needed, but it was also, I was also surprised by how, I think, how hard they laid into it.
Yeah.
Because most cinema is going to give a very tailored idea to whatever like queerness is in a character to suffice or be like clickbait or queer baiting, but it was unapologetically where Desire was. It was, even though they're evil, it's a character that I also adore for the sake of just what they embody, who they embody, the way that they go about. It's very carefree. They give no shits about like what they're doing, and it's something that I wish I had more growing up, because I still define that so much in my youth and in my young adulthood. It was just something that, and I'm still trying to find it, but it's like seeing symbols like that are always reassuring, and it's something you can put, in your lockbox in the brain and just sit there and hold that as a sign of strength and beauty.
Absolutely. Drop Dead Gorgeous, strong character, unrepentant, being itself. I love how they looped the long-term scheme that they had been plotting, and I actually realized exactly what had happened the second time I watched the show, because there's so much going on. But when Desire was on stage, they owned it. Simply owned it. And then suddenly word dream, right? In other words, dream is like what's, and then you're asking yourself, why is dream what, right?
It has me thinking about, in their interpretation visually, what constitutes as queer, if we're kind of having this very dramatic and emphatic statement of the visuals that Desire is presenting. And so I think with the Desire, if we have like the spider bubble and we like have these tangent topics, it would be, I think queerness would be a tangent of Desire, where Desire still is like, it's so as smart in its execution. Just having us define, and like, this is why I loved it, was that they're so small in their presentation compared to everything else we encounter, but there is so much loaded in just understanding outside of a binary sense what these emotions are that we act on explicitly every minute to 5 minutes, whether it's we want a candy bar, whether we want to go get a fresh air, whether we want a cigarette, or whether we find someone at the bar attractive and we act on that. It's something that we desire, and it's a very loaded, it's a very loaded topic, and I feel like I could fangirl over it, so to speak, for so long, because it was just so elegantly but also dramatically done.
Well said. And I felt there were two tracks to go on. One would be representation in media, because you mentioned seeing those images early in your life, right, may have mattered. And then the other one, what is Gaiman doing with the endless?
With regards to what is Gaiman doing with the endless?
Yeah.
He illustrates, and Dream tells Desire this as the whole crux of like, who are we, the endless? Are we the masters of mortals? Are we what drive and direct them? Or do we serve them? Do we, and that was his argument, is that, do not try, do not desire to control. This also can speak to, and I don't know, I'm noticing I'm going into like a more spiritualistic religious bend here, but in the Buddhist philosophy, desire is the root to dissatisfaction, or dukkha. And so if one desires to be in control of someone, then either you don't get the person and you are in despair, or you get the person and you realize that they are mortal, that they change, and that you'll still get in despair. And therefore, there's obviously this link between the two of them, but we mortals always have to deal with the endless, with desire, with despair, with our dreams, which, Ian was noticing is, desire points out, we need to kind of break dream out of this stuffy opinion that he is greater than us, that, really dreams are just the byproduct of desire and despair. There is that interplay between them. And to recognize that and to be aware of all of these aspects that play on us might allow us to have a more richer life, as opposed to just going through life without desire. How terrible would that be?
Or going through life thinking you do it wrong because your desires conflict with your dreams, right? As if somehow the conflict is something to avoid, whereas it's inevitable. I think that's kind of what Gaiman's, we're all dream, we're all desire, we're all death. All these things are in us. And I think Gaiman as a writer, tried to cull those out of the human condition, give them characters, and then brilliantly have them be those parts of ourselves, conflicting with each other, cooperating sometimes, just as we do with those aspects kind of ourselves. And then we can possibly learn not to see the conflict as a problem, but actually a sign of development, a sign of becoming something more complex, versus, oh crap, I'm changing, something's wrong, or crap, I want that, that's wrong, I shouldn't do that, right? So that's the vibe I got, is putting us into motion with 7 variables and showing how they interact.